If you can fit into that dress, I'll marry you. Omar Khalid laughed, his voice echoing through the golden ballroom. The crowd burst into laughter, phones flashing, champagne glasses raised. In that moment, Juliet Thompson, a poor black maid in her gray uniform, became the joke of the night. She stood frozen, her eyes burning, her hands trembling on the handle of her cleaning cart. But no one in that hall knew what they had just started, because the woman they mocked that night would soon return. Not just wearing the dress, but carrying a truth that would destroy the millionaire who thought he could humiliate her. The lights in the ballroom were brighter than Juliet had ever seen. Golden chandeliers sparkled like 100 little suns, and the air smelled of roses, perfume, and money. She moved quietly along the edge of the room, pushing her cleaning cart, careful not to draw attention. She had done this job for 6 years, wiping up the mess left behind by people who never saw her as human, only as part of the background. That night, she was working at the Chicago Metropolitan Fashion Gala, one of the richest events in the city. Every big name was there. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and laughter filled the air like a show that never ended. Juliet kept her head down, mopping a small spill near the corner of the hall, trying not to stare at the women in glittering gowns and the men in their black suits. She had once dreamed of being one of them, designing dresses that would make people gasp. But that dream had faded long ago, buried under hospital bills and sleepless nights caring for her sick mother. Then came the moment that would change everything. At the center of the hall stood a red dress on a silver mannequin. It was beautiful, the kind of beauty that made everyone stop to look. The designer said it was worth more than $800,000, hand-sewn from rare silk. It was made for someone small and perfect, someone with a life built on luxury. Juliet could never have imagined that dress would one day be tied to her name. Omar Khalid, the guest of honor, stood near the display with a glass of champagne in his hand. He was tall, with neatly trimmed hair, sharp eyes, and the confidence of a man who owned everything he looked at. The crowd surrounded him, hanging on to his every word. He was the kind of man who enjoyed attention, who smiled only when people were watching. When he noticed Juliet in her gray uniform standing nearby, his lips curved into a mocking smile. "If you can fit into that dress, I'll marry you," he said loudly, raising his glass and pointing toward the mannequin. The laughter came like thunder. People turned to look at Juliet. Some took out their phones, recording the scene as if it were a comedy show. A woman in a golden gown shouted, "Come on, dear, take the offer. Single millionaires don't come every day." More laughter followed. Juliet stood still, her throat dry, her heart heavy. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the floor. Her face grew hot, her eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of them, not in front of people who found joy in her pain. Omar took a step closer, still smiling, still amused. 30 days, he said. "If in 30 days you can fit into that dress, I'll keep my word." The crowd cheered. Juliet turned away, gripping the handle of her cart so tightly her knuckles turned white. Each laugh behind her felt like a knife cutting deeper. She pushed the cart through the service door and into the quiet hallway. The laughter faded, replaced by silence. Only the sound of her breathing filled the narrow space. She leaned against the cold wall, her body trembling. Then the first tear fell, and another, and another. She pressed her hands over her face, shaking as the pain she had held for years broke free. But inside that pain, something else began to rise. It was not weakness, not shame. It was something sharper, stronger, a spark that had been buried deep inside her. Juliet slowly lifted her head. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, the woman who had taught her never to give up. Her mother used to say, "Dignity is not something people give you, It's something you protect, no matter how hard life gets. Juliet wiped her face with the back of her hand. That night, in that lonely hallway filled with cleaning supplies and the smell of bleach, she made a promise. She would not be the joke of the story. She would not let a rich man define her worth. Juliet walked out of the hotel quietly, the sound of her old shoes echoing on the marble floor. The city lights of Chicago glowed outside, cold but beautiful. She stopped at a bus stop, her eyes still red from crying, and whispered to herself, 30 days, Juliet. 30 days to change everything. When she got home to her small apartment on the south side, her mother was asleep in the living room. The machines beside her hummed softly. Juliet kissed her forehead gently and sat at the kitchen table, opening her old laptop. The screen flickered before lighting up. She searched one name, Omar Khalid. Hundreds of results appeared. Photos of him shaking hands with world leaders, smiling at charity events, surrounded by glamorous women. But beneath all the shine, Juliet found small pieces of darkness. Articles about employees leaving his company without reason, complaints buried under legal language, whispers on forums about things people were too afraid to say out loud. Juliet's tired eyes narrowed. She began saving links, one after another, her fingers shaking with determination. The clock on the wall struck midnight. Outside, the wind howled through the narrow street. Juliet stared at the reflection of her face in the dark laptop screen. "You laughed at me," she said softly. "But I'm not the one who should be afraid." In the corner of the room, her mother stirred in her sleep, coughing weakly. Juliet stood and covered her with a blanket. Then she returned to the table and pulled out an old notebook. On the first page, she wrote one line in neat handwriting. Day 1, prove them wrong. The rest of the night passed without sleep. Juliet stared at the city through the small window, her mind heavy but clear. The same city that had humiliated her would soon watch her rise. She didn't know how yet, but she knew this. She would return to that ballroom, and when she did, she wouldn't just fit into the dress, she would make the man who mocked her remember her name forever. As dawn touched the sky, Juliet whispered one last promise to herself. 30 days, Omar. Let's see who keeps their word. The next morning, the sun rose weakly over Chicago, but Juliet Thompson didn't see it. She was already awake, standing in front of her mirror. Her uniform still smelled of cleaning spray, her eyes were swollen from crying, yet something inside her had changed. The woman looking back at her wasn't broken anymore. She was ready. Juliet pulled on an old gray hoodie and sneakers, then stepped outside. The street was quiet. The cold air bit at her cheeks, but it helped her stay focused. There was a small gym 3 blocks away, one she had passed many times but never entered. The sign read Rita's Fitness Center open 24 hours. The windows were foggy, and the sound of weights clinking echoed inside. When she walked in, a tall woman with strong arms and kind eyes looked up from behind the counter. "First time here?" she asked. Juliet nodded. "I need to train every day, no breaks." The woman raised an eyebrow. "That's serious. You training for something special?" Juliet hesitated, then said quietly, "Someone laughed at me. I need to prove them wrong." The woman studied her for a moment, then smiled. "I'm Rita Lopez. If you're serious, I'll help you. But you do exactly what I say, understand?" Juliet nodded again. That first morning was the hardest. Rita showed her how to stretch, how to breathe, how to move her body slowly but correctly. Every muscle screamed, every step felt heavy. But Juliet refused to stop. Her body had been tired before, but never for herself. For years, she had worked for others. This time, she was working for her dignity. When she got home later, her mother was awake, sitting by the window with a blanket over her shoulders. "You're up early, baby," she said softly. "Where did you go?" Juliet smiled faintly. To make sure nobody ever laughs at me again. Her mother looked at her with tired but loving eyes. You've always been strong. Just remember, strength is not only in your body, it's also in your heart. Juliet nodded, helping her mother take her medicine before heading to work. That afternoon, at the hotel, whispers followed her. Someone had uploaded the video online. Everyone had seen it. That's her, one waiter whispered. The maid from the gala. Poor thing, another said. They shouldn't have done that to her. Juliet ignored them. She kept cleaning quietly, her mind fixed on the promise she had made. When her shift ended, she went straight back to the gym. Rita was waiting, holding a stopwatch. You came back, she said with a grin. That's a good sign. I told you, no breaks. Rita nodded. Then no mercy. Days turned into weeks. Juliet woke up before sunrise, trained until her legs trembled, worked long hours, then cared for her mother at night. When her mother slept, she stayed up at the kitchen table, searching the internet. Every night, she typed the same name, Omar Khalid. She read everything: business articles, interviews, and, buried deep, old news about lawsuits that had disappeared quickly. She found a small online forum where people spoke about working for his company. Some comments mentioned unfair firings, others hinted at something worse. One message caught her eye. He gets away with everything because he keeps files on everyone. One day, it will all come out. Juliet copied the post and saved it. A week later, she found a blog written by a woman named Yasmin Carter, who once worked for Omar's company. The blog didn't use his name, but the stories matched. The woman spoke about being harassed, about silence forced through money. Juliet hesitated before sending a message. It was short and honest. My name is Juliet. I think we've both been hurt by the same man. I need your help. She didn't expect a reply, but 2 hours later her phone rang. You're the woman from the video, a voice said. The one from the gala. Juliet froze. You saw it? Everyone saw it. 2 million views already. But most people are on your side. I was one of them. Juliet took a breath. I read your blog. I think he's done to others what he did to you, maybe worse. There was silence for a moment. Then Yasmin said, Meet me tomorrow. I need to see your face before I tell you anything. They met the next day in a small cafe in South Chicago. Yasmin was in her mid-30s, with tired eyes but a voice filled with strength. Omar Khalid is dangerous, she said quietly. He uses people and then destroys them. But he's careful. He keeps records on everyone: employees, partners, even his own family. He's protected by fear. Do you know where he keeps those records? Juliet asked. No, Yasmin said, but I know someone who might. His former driver. Name's Jamal Harris. He worked for Omar for 8 years. He was fired after seeing something he shouldn't have. Juliet wrote the name down carefully. Can you help me find him? Yasmin nodded. I'll make the call. That night, Juliet returned home feeling both scared and strong. She looked at her reflection again. Her face had changed. The softness was still there, but behind it was fire. She sat beside her mother, who was watching an old movie. Mama, she said softly, what if I told you I'm going to stand up to someone powerful? Her mother smiled weakly. Then I'd tell you to stand tall, but don't lose your heart. Juliet rested her head on her mother's shoulder. I'm doing this for us. As the night grew quiet, Juliet's phone buzzed. A text from Yasmin appeared. Found him. Jamal's ready to talk. He said he's been waiting for this. Juliet's fingers tightened around the phone. Her heart filled with a mix of fear and hope. She looked out the window, the city lights flickering below the dark sky. Somewhere out there, Omar Khalid slept peacefully, thinking he had won. But Juliet whispered into the night, "You laughed at me, Omar. In 30 days, the whole world will see who you really are." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, as if the city itself was waiting for the storm she was about to bring. The next afternoon, the wind in Chicago carried a sharp chill. Juliet Thompson stepped off the bus near an old diner in the west side of the city. The place was quiet, the kind of spot where no one asked questions. She spotted Yasmin Carter sitting at a corner booth, sipping coffee nervously. Across from her sat a tired-looking man with gray streaks in his beard and weary eyes. When Juliet entered, Yasmin waved her over. "Juliet, this is Jamal Harris," she said. Jamal studied her carefully, as if trying to understand why a cleaning lady was sitting across from him talking about one of the richest men in America. "So, you're the woman from the video," he said slowly. Juliet nodded. "I didn't plan for it to go viral, but now that it has, I can't waste the chance. I need to make him answer for everything he's done." Jamal's lips tightened. "You think it's easy to go after a man like Omar Khalid? I drove for him 8 years. I've seen what happens to people who cross him." "Then you know why he needs to be stopped," Juliet said firmly. The man stared at her for a moment, then sighed. "He ruined my daughter's life," Jamal said quietly. "She worked in his office. When she refused his advances, he fired her and spread lies. She hasn't been the same since." Juliet felt her throat tighten. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Jamal looked up. "I don't want your sorry. I want him to pay. That's why I'm here." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Omar keeps everything. Photos, messages, contracts, even blackmail materials. He stores it all in a digital safe, but the physical backup is with his personal lawyer downtown. The man lives in a penthouse on State Street. I know where he hides the key." Juliet's pulse quickened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you remind me of my daughter," Jamal said softly, "and because I'm tired of being afraid." He slid a small folded note across the table. "The address. But be careful. This man doesn't sleep easy." Juliet nodded, tucking the paper into her pocket. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her small apartment was dark, except for the light from her laptop. Her mother slept peacefully in the next room, and Juliet sat watching the rain hit the window. Her heart was heavy, but her mind was clear. She had a plan. In 2 weeks, the charity auction would take place. Omar would be there, smiling for the cameras, pretending to be the perfect gentleman. Juliet's goal was simple: expose him in front of everyone, the same way he humiliated her. But she couldn't do it alone. She met Yasmin again 2 days later at the cafe. This time, Yasmin brought 3 other women. Their faces carried the same mix of pain and courage. Each one had a story about Omar, stories of lies, silence, and fear. Juliet looked around the table and said softly, "He took our voices. Let's take them back." The women agreed. Yasmin leaned in and whispered, "We'll need proof. The kind that can't be erased." Juliet nodded. "That's what the lawyer's apartment is for." Over the next few days, the small group planned carefully. Jamal watched the building for them, learning when the lawyer left and who came to visit. Yasmin arranged for copies of legal documents in case they needed protection. Juliet trained harder at the gym, using her growing strength to keep her fear under control. One evening, as she was finishing her last workout, Rita wiped her hands on a towel and said, "You've changed, Juliet. You're faster, stronger. But your eyes, they look like someone preparing for war." Juliet smiled faintly. "Maybe I am." Rita frowned. "Just make sure you don't lose yourself in the fight." Juliet didn't answer. She just kept running on the treadmill, each step echoing her silent promise. On the 28th day, Jamal called. "It's time. The lawyer is leaving for a business trip tonight." The place will be empty until Monday. Juliet met him at the corner of State and Monroe. The city lights shimmered against the wet streets. Jamal handed her a small flash drive. "Whatever you find, copy it here," he said. "Then get out fast." Juliet's heart raced as she followed Jamal into the tall building. The elevator ride felt endless. When they reached the penthouse, Jamal unlocked the door with a spare key he had taken long ago. Inside, the air smelled of expensive cologne and leather. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books, awards, and framed photos. But behind one of the shelves, Jamal found what he was looking for, a small safe built into the wall. He knelt down and inserted the key. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside were stacks of drives, envelopes, and flash disks, all neatly labeled. Juliet reached out, her hands trembling. She read the labels. Contracts, settlements, personal photos, emails. She didn't have time to look through them all. She plugged the flash drive in and began copying everything. The bar on the laptop moved slowly, each second feeling like an hour. Suddenly, Jamal froze. "Someone's here," he whispered. Juliet's heart skipped. She closed the laptop and grabbed the drive just as the elevator bell rang. They slipped quietly out through the service exit, their breaths shallow. When they finally reached the street, both of them exhaled at once. "Did you get it?" Jamal asked. Juliet held up the flash drive. Every single file. That night, Juliet and Yasmin gathered at Yasmin's apartment. The women crowded around as Juliet connected the drive to her laptop. Folders opened one by one. They found bank records, private messages, even recordings of phone calls. One file made Yasmin gasp, a video of Omar threatening a former employee. "If she doesn't take the money," he said, his voice cold, "destroy her reputation. I don't care how." Silence filled the room. Juliet closed the laptop slowly. "This is it," she said. "This is what will end him." Yasmin touched her arm. "Are you ready for what happens after this?" Juliet nodded. "I've been ready since the night he laughed at me." She stood by the window, looking out over the city lights. Her reflection showed a woman she hardly recognized, strong, calm, and fearless. The red dress would soon be auctioned again at the same hotel, in front of the same people. Only this time, Juliet wouldn't be the cleaning lady in the corner. She whispered to herself, "You said 30 days, Omar. You were right. 30 days is all I needed." The city outside was quiet, but Juliet could almost hear the storm approaching. The night of the charity auction arrived like the calm before a storm. The ballroom at the Chicago Plaza Hotel glowed under golden chandeliers. Guests in sparkling gowns and polished shoes filled the room, chatting about fashion, money, and power. On a raised platform in the center stood the red dress, the same one that had started it all. Juliet Thompson stood across the street, watching the lights through the glass doors. Her heart was steady, not weak or afraid like before. She wore a simple black gown that she had sewn herself, one that fit her body perfectly. Rita had helped her fix her hair, Yasmin had done her makeup, and Jamal had parked the car a few blocks away with a backup drive of everything they had found. Inside, Omar Khalid was smiling for the cameras. His expensive suit shone under the lights, his laughter filling the air like nothing had ever gone wrong. Reporters surrounded him, snapping pictures. Juliet waited for the right moment, her hands hidden in her clutch bag, where her phone rested ready to record. She took a deep breath and walked in. The guards at the entrance didn't stop her. No one recognized her at first. Her steps were calm, her eyes fixed on the red dress. When she entered the hall, the music slowed, as if the air itself sensed what was coming. Omar was speaking with investors when his eyes met hers. For a moment, he didn't know who she was. Then recognition hit. His smile faded. Juliet walked straight toward him. The crowd turned, whispering. Cameras followed. Someone murmured, "That's her. The woman from the video." Omar tried to recover his charm. "Ah, Miss Thompson," he said with a forced laugh. "You really came. Still thinking about that joke?" Juliet stopped a few feet away, her voice steady. "You said if I fit into that dress, you'd marry me. 30 days have passed." The crowd grew silent. Omar gave an uneasy smile. "It was just humor, my dear. No one took it seriously." Juliet reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and pressed play. His voice filled the room, recorded from the first night. "If you can fit into that dress, I'll marry you," it said. The laughter from the old video echoed again, and everyone turned to him. Omar's face drained of color. Juliet's tone was calm but sharp. "You laughed at me. You made me feel small. But tonight, you'll listen." Yasmin and the 3 other women stepped out from the crowd. They surrounded Juliet, forming a small circle. Reporters began filming. Juliet looked at the audience. "This man isn't who he pretends to be. He hides behind his money, behind his company, behind his image. But tonight, you'll see what he's really built his empire on: lies, pain, and silence." She lifted her phone and projected it to the main screen. Folders opened, revealing emails, messages, and bank transfers. The screen filled with evidence: bribes to inspectors, messages to employees, and recordings of his threats. Omar shouted, "That's fake! Stop this!" But Yasmin stepped forward, holding printed documents. "It's not fake. These are his victims. I was one of them." Gasps filled the hall. The silence grew heavier. Omar's lawyer tried to reach him, but it was too late. Police officers, tipped off by Jamal, were already at the entrance. Juliet faced Omar directly. "You once told me I wasn't good enough to wear this dress, but I tried it on yesterday. It fits perfectly. You were wrong about me, about every woman you hurt, about what power means." Her voice broke slightly, but she didn't stop. "This isn't revenge. This is justice." Omar looked around helplessly. The people who once laughed with him now backed away. Reporters shouted questions. The police stepped forward. "Mr. Khalid," one of the officers said, "you need to come with us. You're under investigation for bribery and harassment." The entire hall erupted. Cameras flashed, guests gasped, and for the first time, Omar didn't have a word to say. He looked at Juliet, not with anger, but with disbelief. She stood tall, calm, and unshaken as the officers led him out. When the doors closed behind him, the room remained silent. Then, slowly, people began to clap. First one, then 2, then dozens. The applause grew until it filled the hall like thunder. Yasmin hugged Juliet tightly. "You did it," she whispered. Juliet smiled faintly. "No, we did it." That night, the video of the confrontation spread faster than anyone imagined. Millions watched as the once untouchable millionaire was exposed by the woman he had humiliated. News channels replayed the footage, calling it the red dress revenge. But for Juliet, it wasn't about revenge at all. It was about respect. Weeks later, Omar Khalid was sentenced for bribery and obstruction. His empire fell apart, his family cut ties, and a $50 million fund was created for the victims of his company. Juliet's face appeared on magazine covers and talk shows, but she turned down most interviews. Fame wasn't what she wanted. One morning, she received a letter. No name, no return address, just the signature Omar. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But your courage forced me to look in the mirror. You didn't destroy me, Juliet. You revealed me." Juliet folded the letter carefully and placed it in a small box beside her sewing machine. A month later, she walked across the stage at the University of Illinois School of Design to receive her diploma. The audience stood as she gave her speech. She wore a red dress, not the one from the gala, but one she made herself, simple and beautiful. "Once, someone told me I would never fit into a dress," she said softly. "But what they didn't know was that I had spent years trying to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. That dress was never the problem. The problem was believing I had to change to deserve respect." The crowd applauded, some with tears in their eyes. Juliet smiled, her voice calm but full of life. "So I didn't come here to tell a story about revenge. I came to tell a story about rebuilding. Because the best way to respond to people who look down on you is to build something so strong that their opinions become nothing but noise." Later that evening, she walked home through the Chicago streets, diploma in hand. She passed the same gym where Rita had first trained her, the same cafe where she met Yasmin, and finally, the same hotel where it had all begun. She stopped for a moment, looking up at its glowing windows. Then she smiled and whispered, "Thank you for the lesson." And she kept walking, her steps steady, her heart free. The woman the world once mocked had become a symbol of strength. Juliet Thompson no longer needed to fit into anyone's dress. She had stitched her own. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that no one has the right to decide our worth. Juliet was laughed at, insulted, and humiliated in front of the world, yet she rose from the same place where they tried to break her. She didn't seek revenge, she chose dignity, and that became her victory. In life, people may look down on you, they may laugh at your pain, but remember, the power to rise is inside you, not in their opinion. Respect isn't given by the rich or powerful, it is earned by those who refuse to bow down. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments what you learned from Juliet's courage. Where are you watching from? We love to know the hearts behind every screen. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe for more emotional stories like this one. Because here on our channel, we believe that true power doesn't come from money or fame, it comes from kindness, self-worth, and the will to stand again when life knocks you down. Now tell us, dear viewers. 1. What would you have done if you were Juliet that night? 2. Have you ever been underestimated but proved people wrong? 3. What lesson will you carry from this story into your own life? We'll be waiting for your answers in the comments. Until the next story, stay strong, stay kind, and never forget dignity has no price.